You're listening to Live from the Heartland, and one of the things that we have been excited about over the last year is a new paper that is coming out in our neighborhood called the Urban Coaster. It covers from the local to the global, and it was founded by a few people, at the center of which is a man named Jim Gindersky. Good morning to you, Jim.
Morning, Michael.
Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
It's rarely I see you here in the morning.
Well,
no, he's here all the time.
It's the free cup of coffee I come for, you know.
Oh, you get breakfast, too. I'll take care of you.
Outstanding.
All right. So, Jim, I asked you to come on this morning to give us a little bit of an around the neighborhood tour. Tell us what's going on in our community and beyond.
Well, obviously this Olympic thing is significant. We had actually, because of our publishing date, write 2 editorials, and it was a really great exercise. One if we got the Olympic bid, and one if we didn't. So we were forced to kind of think about the similarity between what was going to happen if we got the event and what could be done here locally with that, and what's still possible and really kind of an obligation, given all these forces that were pulled together and all this money that was spent to do this. What's still a possibility locally here in the community. So. I do think that, as your last guest was talking about, this is a really probably a tough defeat for a group that doesn't normally have to deal with not winning. But the bottom line is that there's still a lot of challenges here in the city. We had that terrible beating on the south side, and it was said over and over again that. That wasn't really an unusual incident in what was actually happening there in the street. We've had a lot of tensions locally with that kind of stuff, and there's a real obligation, I think, to meeting some of those challenges. So.
Well, let me ask you, as not only a publisher but as kind of an activist guy, what you think are the issues before us, and what you think we might start pushing for without the Olympics. Thom Clark from the Community Media Workshop was up earlier, as you mentioned, and addressed a little bit of it. I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things is to start to really think about preparing the next generation for responsible adulthood. In terms of youth programs, that's always a kind of a popular and an important issue. That was something that obviously linked very seamlessly to an Olympic bid, because you could talk about youth sports and the importance of that. And there was a lot of talk about how the Olympics would impact youth programs locally and across the city. Well, that mandate for that need still exists, and I think that's something that we really need to do a lot of work on. We need to rethink how we do it in a lot of cases. We just opened our $10 million building up on Howard Street there, but there's a challenge to get folks in to use that facility. So we need to really think about how best to reach the youth that need to be reached the most, to get them to make better choices. And we've got I think a 48% graduation rate at our local high school here. We need to work on changing that so that these kids are prepared for some kind of a responsible adulthood. If we miss that opportunity, we pretty much guarantee ourselves problems for a long time to come.
You mentioned the new community center up there, the Willie White Center, and it just had a naming ceremony and an event, and I noticed that they also had some musical events up there lately. Have you been by up there or checked it out? Do you know what's going on?
Oh yeah. Well, they've got the usual panoply of Park District programs, all fee-based. We actually did a story about the opening for this issue. It was interesting because there were every politician that I can think of was there. There weren't a whole lot of community folks present, and that's kind of been the way it's gone so far. They've had a real tough time bringing in local community folks, especially the kids that need to be there. And some folks are Irma Tranter, Friends of the Park. Some of the folks at the Park District believe it's because of fees. There are other folks that believe that some of the relationship building that needs to happen is just going to take a lot of time, and that time there hasn't been enough of that time yet for that to occur. I personally believe that unless we find a new way to reach out to some of these kids, that's not just going to happen on its own. We have to come up with new strategies to do that.
You're listening to Live from the Heartland. I'm talking with Jim Gindersky, the publisher of the Urban Coaster, a local neighborhood paper, comes out every 2 weeks. And Jim, you just mentioned Irma Tranter and Friends of the Park. We first got to know Irma back in the early days of Chicago marathoning. I think the Friends of the Park has done some very good work over the years. They also are involved now in trying to extend the vision of the lakefront being all parks, and there's some debate over how they've gone about that. Would you care to address that a little bit?
Sure. Well, what's really interesting about the whole last 4 miles proposal, which is what you're referring to, is how directly it mirrors the whole Olympic process, in that there was this sort of reaching out to the communities, but in a very limited way, and in a way that inevitably provided, it was very strictly controlled, and it always provided sort of the answer they needed to hear to further the plan. These folks came to meetings up here in Rogers Park and in Edgewater with an agenda, and they were pretty clear about it. They brought architects along with them, volunteer folks that were willing to give their time to the project, but they came here exclusively and very expressly to say, hey, we want to find a way to what they call extend Burnham's vision up the front of the lakefront. And some of the improvements they talk about would be good, but a lot of them involve significant landfill and really a substantive change from the street end orientation of our beaches to sort of the north-south traffic flow of the beaches south of here, which is a fundamental change in our relationship with the lakefront. So I don't think that one way is necessarily better, but I do think that in this vast lakefront in Chicago, we have we got enough space up here in the northern corner to keep this different vision going. I think it doesn't take away from the overall package. It certainly isn't at odds with Burnham's plan of free open access. There are a couple spots here where access could be better. Loyola University is one of them, but to suggest that we need to kind of revamp the whole thing, that's definitely not something local folks agree with.
Would you see a way where you could really do minimal development along the lake in terms of a park? Like I talked to someone recently, and I don't remember who, but basically said, oh, I think the bike trail would be great to go all the way. And is that a possibility without, the fear a lot of us have had for a long time is that not only would they maybe want to build a highway out there in the middle of the lake, which they used to talk about, and or building roads along through a expanded park district, but how would you do it if you just were going to have a bike trail? Would that be something possible?
Well, anything's possible, but the challenge there's really two challenges. The first is that with a bike path, it sounds like just a little pathway that bicycles ride down, but the fact is emergency vehicles need to have access to it, and that actually is a 16-foot wide road. So you need to actually build a road. And the other thing is, if I know the Sun-Times ran a couple of really good stories recently about the number of accidents they've had south in the area south of here where they have a bike path. It's real tough to control that north-south flow of traffic, sometimes going at really high rates of speed right through the center of the park. You're not going to put speed bumps in for bicyclists, obviously, and in that sense, it would be a very different feel out there for us. So if that's what the majority of folks in the community want to do, then that's what we should do. But thus far, that hasn't been the case.